Fear is the mind killer. Hi, I'm Reverend Andrew Bozeman, and this is On the Wings of Your Mind. You know, fear is the mind killer. Most of us have the talent and the abilities to do much more with our lives than we're currently doing. But we don't allow ourselves to express that greatness within ourselves. Why is that? I chalk it up to fear. We all have it. The question is, will we conquer fear, or will fear conquer us? I can remember many years ago when I was a pharmaceutical sales representative for a company, a pharmaceutical company. My job was to call on doctors and persuade them to write prescriptions for the drugs that my company manufactured instead of for the drugs that our competitors manufactured. And we had an impressive line of products. One new one that we were introducing was called Tylenol, special medicine. So I went through the sales training program that they offer, and I was the #1 trainee at graduation. I had outpaced everybody in the learning curve. But when I got out into the field, I didn't do as well as I was expecting to do. It wasn't that I couldn't sell. The doctors I called on liked me, and many of them were persuaded to switch to my products. No, I wasn't the top salesman that my trainers thought I would be. Why? Because there were too many days when I would sit in my car in front of medical office buildings, paralyzed with fear. There were days when I conquered the fear, and when those days came, I was a great salesman. But there were too many days when fear conquered me. So rather than being an outstanding salesman, I was barely competent. Fear. Fear is a natural feature in the human body. It's hardwired into us. We can't get rid of it. It's called the fight, flight, or freeze response. It is fear that makes us run when we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Trouble is, the saber-toothed tiger went extinct 10,000 years ago. Please, click on the thumbs up button, and if you haven't already done so, please choose to subscribe. Let's see, the thumbs up button is below. The subscribe button is the logo in the lower right-hand corner, and I would love to get your thoughts, your comments, your questions, your suggestions. So if you're viewing this live, please use the chat box on the right side of the screen. If you're viewing this in replay, please use the comment section below. But I'd love to hear from you. So even though we no longer have to run from wild animals, we still have the fight, flight, and freeze response. It's there as a natural part of our bodies. It's embedded in our DNA. So living in a society, a civilized society, such as the one we live in, still puts us in situations that invoke our fear response. We experience fear when we have to take a test in school. We experience fear when we go for a job interview. We experience fear when we have to go into the boss's office and ask for a raise. We experience fear when we go on our first date. We experience fear when we sit through a horror movie. We experience fear when we have to stand up before a group and make a presentation. Fear. It's a part of our everyday lives. But don't get me wrong, fear is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a great motivator. Fear of failure can inspire outstanding performances. I can remember that as an actor, I always felt fear, lots of fear on opening night before going on stage. And at that time, the fear that I felt would energize me and give me an extra burst of energy to do my very best. But the presence of fear too often can undermine our confidence, block our minds when we need to come up with an answer, and sometimes fear can leave us paralyzed when we need most to be active and strong. The author the author Frank Herbert, creator of the Dune series, saw fear as a very real factor to be dealt with in his epic stories. Because let me see here, Dune. Oh, there it is. There were a number of books that he wrote in the Dune series. That fear was an important part of. In fact, he wrote a mantra for dealing with fear in his books. Let's take a look at that mantra. So he said, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass through me, over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn my inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. It's quite a statement. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Powerful, very powerful. In his article titled 3 Ways to Overcome Fear Immediately, Matt Mayberry is a corporate coach who teaches high performance. Anyway, in his article, he suggested creating a mantra like the one I just read from Dune, for yourself in a way to rewire your brain to overcome fears, rewire your brain to develop your courage when it's needed to get you to where you want to go. Now, there was a time when I used Frank Herbert's mantra. I didn't use the whole thing, and I reduced it for my own sake, but I used it, and I found it to be effective for me. The change I made in it was this. I said, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. I will face my fear, and I will let it pass through me. And when the fear has passed, only I will remain. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. I will face my fear, and I will let it pass through me. And when the fear has passed, only I will remain. So it's basically the same mantra, a lot shorter though. So Matt Mayberry, as I said, the performance coach, says it's important that we rewire our brains to overcome fear, because in order to control us, when we were younger, in order to control us, we were being trained from childhood to believe that we couldn't do things, or we couldn't be what we wanted to be, or we couldn't have what we wanted to have. We were trained to be quiet, be still, don't misbehave, don't be disrespectful, don't rock the boat. I mean, most of us heard those kinds of things when we were growing up. Another untruth that it was drilled into us from childhood is that we were alone, that we were, I don't know if it wasn't that we were specifically told that we were alone, but we were told quite often that we were sinners, that we were bad. We were not told that we were spiritual beings. We were not told that we were individualized expressions of infinite intelligence. We weren't told that. We weren't told that at all, that we were individualized expressions of infinite intelligence. We were not told that we are magnificent spiritual beings. who have entered this physical body for the sake of learning through human experience so that we can grow and expand. We weren't told that. Most people didn't know it at the time. They had forgotten. But that's what we're here for. You know, most of us are programmed to accept no as an answer, but that's not who we are. Because if we continue to accept our childhood programming, we'll end up sitting in the corner and fading away until we've disappeared from the world. No. So how do we overcome our negative programming? How do we conquer this deep-seated fear? Well, one thing you can do when you feel fear is figure out what you are afraid of. What is the fear about? Because when you really examine it, sometimes the fear is just fear. Nothing specific. It's just that you're afraid. You just have this sense that something will go wrong. Fear. You know, President Franklin Roosevelt put his finger on that one in his 1933 inauguration speech when he said, "You have nothing to fear but fear itself. You have nothing to fear but fear itself." Now, other times you may find that there is a fear is something to be identified, something that you're actually facing, and there's a reason for you being afraid. There are times when that's true. But I tell you this, once you identify what you're afraid of, you have made a significant step towards overcoming it. Once you identify it. I remember when I was a kid, I was a bookworm. My favorite thing to do was to be in my room reading a science fiction or a sword or sorcery fantasy book. Physically, I was really skinny and physically uncoordinated. I was clumsy. So fighting was not a big part of my life. Conversely, in my neighborhood, there was this family that everybody was afraid of. They had a reputation for loving to fight, and they were the local bullies. And the big brothers trained the little brothers how to be bullies too, and it worked for them. So the little brother that terrorized me was named David. They called him Day Day. Now, whenever Day Day caught me, he would demand my lunch money, and I'd give it up. So knowing what he was going to do, I got pretty good at staying out of his sight. When I saw him coming, I would hide. But then one day, I was out in the yard working on my bike, and he came by. He looked at the bike, and he walked up, and he told me he wanted to take a ride on my bike. Nice bike, I'm going to take a ride. Well, I told him that I wasn't allowed to let anyone ride on my bike, which he wouldn't accept. He challenged me, and he announced that he was just going to take my bike. At that point, we reached a pivotal moment in our relationship. Now, if I continued to deny him access to my bike, he might beat me up and still take the bike. That was a possibility. On the other hand, if I let him take that bike, I would have to face my mother, the wrath of my outraged mother, and tell you truly, that was worse. Facing my mother was much more life-threatening than the bully standing in front of me. No comparison. So at that moment, the terror that filled me was transformed into a powerful surge of deep-seated anger, like the Hulk. And that anger, that righteous indignation, was all focused on the identifiable object of my fear, Day Day. I indignantly threw down my tools on the ground, and I stepped up to him face to face, staring directly in his eyes. I said, "If you want my bike, you're going to have to kill me to get it." My body was trembling. My heart was pounding. My eyes were fiery. I was on the verge of tears, but I was on fire. But at that point, I was totally ready to commit extreme physical violence on him, with every fiber of my being was aching to exact revenge for all the anxiety he had put me through over the past months. I guess Day Day realized the danger he was in. He looked shocked. He stared at me for a minute to assess the situation, and then he laughed, and he said, I was just kidding. And he walked away. I was just kidding. But from that point on, whenever he saw me, he would give me a friendly wave, and he never demanded my lunch money again. 2 points here. The first is that once the fear is identified, once you have identified the object of your fear, the reason for your fear, it can be overcome. The second is that fear always comes back. So what happens to our bodies when we experience fear? What happens when that fight, flight, or freeze response kicks in? Well, the first response is that your body is immediately flooded with adrenaline to produce a rush of energy in case you need to either fight or run. Next, your body pumps cortisol to your body, various organs, so that they will function better in this stressful situation. And then there's this surge of norepinephrine to increase the brain's alertness and focus on survival. And in the rest of your body, your heart rate speeds up, your blood pressure rises, glucose is released for sustained energy, blood flow to your muscles increases, blood flow to your digestive system stops, because you don't need to be digesting food, you're on the run. And the bladder shuts down. Don't have time to take a leak. The frontal lobe of your brain turns off. That one's key. The frontal lobe of your brain turns off when you're in the fight or flight mode. The body and the brain are only concerned with survival at that point. That's why when you're in that state, your mind cannot think clearly or rationally. The lobe is turned off. So trying to work with a smart decision-making is totally out of the question. You don't have time to think. Act, act, act. That's all your body knows what to do. That's why Frank Herbert describes fear as the mind killer, because that's what it does. It kills the mind. So what we need to do is put our fear in its place. We know that it's going to be with us. We know that it's always going to be there, but we need to develop the tools to handle it and maybe even use it to our advantage. If we can do that, fear won't be able to stop us from being the person we came here to be, confident, strong, spiritually centered, and wonderfully successful. Yeah, we can do that. So, hey, let's talk more about that tomorrow, spiritual warriors. Let's talk about how we can control our fear and use it to our advantage. In the meantime, let's close with prayer. Thank you, infinite intelligence, for bringing all of us together in this life so that we may become spiritual warriors and join in the work we have come here to do. Thank you, infinite intelligence, for bringing us into this space of awareness and a deeper understanding of ourselves and our relationship to life and infinite intelligence. Thank you for showing us who we really are. We open our minds and hearts to the truth of our being. We are the children of God. We are individualized expressions of infinite intelligence. And because we are part of the greater whole, we're beginning to understand our value to the continuity of life on this planet. As we become channels of your power, infinite intelligence, we can feel your presence within ourselves and within our lives more and more. We know that as we feel your presence within our lives every day, we will rise because we are no longer cut off from you by being immersed in the darkness of fear, anger, and the pain of unforgiveness. So we are now restoring our connection through the grace of forgiveness, knowing that as we learn to forgive ourselves for the pain that we have caused to ourselves, and as we learn to forgive those who have inflicted pain upon us, our connections will grow stronger, and our lives will grow happier and healthier and more prosperous. And for this, we are truly grateful. As above, so below. As within, so without. And so it is. Amen. Well, thank you for watching. Uh, Remember, I'd love it if you would click on the thumbs up button below. Uh, if you haven't already, please choose to subscribe. You can just use the logo on the lower right-hand corner. Uh, and comments. Would love to get your comments. I've been getting some interesting comments, so I'd love to get your comments. You can put them. You can put them below. Your comments, your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, your suggestions. I'm open to all that. I'm looking forward to getting it. So anyway, let's meet again tomorrow and talk about how we can bring our fear under control and use it for our own use. Make it work for us. Okay? So, my name is Reverend Andrew Bozeman, and this has been On the Wings of Your Mind.